The sun was setting behind a row of barren trees, casting long shadows over the gravel road that led out of town. It had rained earlier that day, and puddles shimmered like mirrors on the uneven ground. The air smelled of damp earth and fading daylight, the kind of evening that whispered solitude. Claire Matthews gripped the steering wheel of her old Ford pickup tighter. She was on her way back from visiting her mother's farmhouse, something she hadn't done in years, and the visit had left her heart heavy with bittersweet memories. She turned onto the remote back road to clear her mind, seeking a moment of silence away from the traffic and chaos. As she drove past a bend, something darted across the road. She slammed on the brakes, her heart leaping to her throat. The tires skidded slightly on the wet gravel before the truck came to a stop. Through the windshield, she saw a figure, low to the ground, ragged, shivering, a dog. Claire slowly stepped out of the truck, cautiously approaching the creature that stood frozen by the roadside. It was a medium-sized dog, perhaps once golden, now coated in dirt and mud. Ribs protruded from his sides and his fur was matted and patchy. He looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. His eyes, dull, wide, and cautious, followed her every move. "Hey there, buddy," Claire murmured. Crouching low, her voice was soft, trembling with concern. "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." The dog didn't move. She extended a hand slowly, palm up, showing him she had no intention to harm. Her other hand reached into her coat pocket, fishing out the granola bar she hadn't eaten earlier. She unwrapped it and held it out gently. The dog's nose twitched. He inched forward, hunger overtaking fear, and cautiously took the bar from her hand before retreating a few steps back. He devoured it in seconds, then looked up at her again as if unsure what to expect. "You poor thing," Claire whispered, her eyes stinging with emotion. "You've been out here alone, haven't you?" The dog didn't wag his tail. He didn't move closer. He simply stared. But there was something more in his gaze, not just hunger or fear, but purpose, like he was guarding something. Claire reached into the truck again and pulled out a blanket, kneeling down and slowly approaching him. This time the dog didn't back away. He watched her wrap the blanket around his frail body, still shivering from the cold. The moment her hands touched him, he flinched, but he didn't growl. He was too tired to resist kindness. Claire sat with him for a while, brushing the dirt from his fur, whispering words of comfort. The silence of the woods seemed to close in around them, peaceful yet haunted by the ghost of his suffering. "I'm gonna help you," she said softly. "We'll get you warm fed, maybe even home." She stood up, expecting him to follow her to the truck, but he didn't move. Instead, he turned around and limped back toward the trees, looking over his shoulder as if to beckon her. "Wait," she said, confused. "Where are you going?" The dog barked once, not loud, but urgent. He paused and looked at her again. Claire hesitated, then followed. He led her off the road and into the thicket, stepping carefully around fallen branches and soft mud. He moved with difficulty, clearly injured or exhausted, but he never stopped. Every few feet he'd turn back to check that she was still there. About 50 yards in, they reached a small clearing, barely noticeable from the road. At the center, nestled in a patch of dry grass surrounded by brambles, was something. Claire stepped closer and gasped. It was a bundle of fur. Two tiny puppies, no more than a few weeks old, lay curled together in a makeshift bed of leaves and twigs. They were trembling, their eyes barely open, their breathing shallow. And next to them, a rusted tin can with a few pieces of old bread inside. "Oh my God." Claire knelt down, heart pounding. "These are your babies?" The dog stepped between her and the puppies protectively, though his stance was weak. He looked at her, pleading. Claire could feel the tears rise as she realized what had been happening. He hadn't just been surviving. He had been guarding them. Despite starvation, pain, and abandonment, this dog, a father perhaps, had stayed with them, refusing to leave even when it meant risking his own life. "You've been keeping them alive," Claire said, her voice cracking. "You gave up everything for them." She reached into her coat and gently picked up the smaller of the two puppies, cradling it against her chest. The second whimpered as she lifted it too, both so small they barely filled her arms. The older dog limped forward, sniffing them, making sure they were safe. Claire nodded through tears. "We'll get you all out of here, I promise." She ran back to her truck, returned with a soft towel and her emergency first aid kit, and wrapped the puppies carefully. She laid them in a box lined with a fleece jacket and placed it gently in the back seat. Then she returned for the older dog, lifting him slowly and gently into the passenger side. He didn't resist. He simply laid his head down and closed his eyes, his breathing shallow but calm, as if knowing, finally, they were safe. As she drove away from the woods, Claire glanced over at him. He opened one eye, just enough to meet her gaze. In that look was a universe of gratitude. "You're not just a dog," she whispered, hand on the steering wheel. "You're a hero." Claire arrived at the local veterinary clinic just as the last hints of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting a golden-orange hue across the sleepy town. The neon sign above the small brick building flickered to life. Whispering Pines Animal Clinic. Inside, the warm light and faint scent of antiseptic felt oddly comforting, a place of hope stitched together with healing hands. She pulled the cardboard box containing the two fragile puppies from the back seat, then opened the passenger door to gently help the older dog, now too weak to move on his own. His limp was worse now. The adrenaline that had pushed him to find help had faded, and only raw exhaustion remained. "Hold on," Claire whispered, cradling the dog's weight as she carried him in her arms toward the entrance. "We're going to take care of you, I swear." The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. A receptionist looked up, her eyes widening the moment she saw the scene unfolding. A woman in muddy jeans, cheeks flushed with urgency, holding a skeletal dog and accompanied by a box of trembling newborn pups. "I need help," Claire gasped. "He's starving, injured. And the puppies, they're so cold." Without hesitation, a vet tech came rushing from behind the counter, followed closely by a young veterinarian, Dr. Lena Harris. In minutes, the reception area transformed into an emergency triage room. The older dog was taken to a warm exam table, where blankets and soft hands greeted him. The puppies were moved to a heated incubator and hooked to gentle fluids under soft lights, their whimpers fading into contented sighs as warmth finally returned to their tiny bodies. Claire sat in a corner, her arms still shaking. She had driven on autopilot, her only thought being, save them. Now that they were here, safe and being cared for, the floodgates opened. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed quietly, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Dr. Harris approached gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing bringing them in," she said softly. "You probably saved their lives." Claire looked up, tears tracing muddy streaks down her face. He led me to them. That dog. He could have gone anywhere, but he stayed, guarding them. I don't even know who he belongs to, if anyone. I just found him on the road." Dr. Harris nodded, kneeling down beside her. "He's a remarkable soul. Dogs like that, they don't come around often. He's dehydrated, anemic, severely malnourished, and he has an infected wound on his back leg. But he's a fighter. And those pups, we're doing everything we can." The night passed slowly. Claire refused to leave. She sat curled in a chair in the corner of the clinic room, watching through the observation window. The dog, who she had started calling Guardian, was sedated, hooked to IV fluids, and covered in warm blankets. The puppies, nestled in the incubator, finally began to nurse from bottle feeders under the watchful eyes of the vet staff. Around 2 a.m., Claire finally let her eyes close, drifting into an uneasy sleep, a dreamscape filled with whimpers, soft fur, and those soulful brown eyes that wouldn't leave her. Morning light filtered through the windows of the clinic. The rain had returned, gentle and rhythmic, tapping against the glass like a lullaby. Claire stirred awake, her back stiff from sleeping in a chair. But her first thought was of him. She stood, stretched, and walked into the treatment room. Guardian was awake, barely. His eyes opened as she entered, and when he saw her, truly saw her, his tail gave a weak wag. Claire knelt beside him, brushing a gentle hand over his head. "Hey, big guy," she said softly. "You're still with us." Dr. Harris appeared, behind her, offering a tired smile. "He made it through the night, that's something." "And the puppies?" Claire asked quickly. "Stronger by the hour," she replied. "They're not out of the woods yet, but I'm hopeful." Claire exhaled, feeling the tension in her chest ease just a bit. She looked down at Guardian again, her voice cracking. "You did it. You kept them alive." She sat beside him for hours, whispering to him, gently stroking his fur. With each passing hour, the dog began to show the smallest signs of strength. A flicker of his ear, a paw twitch, a sigh that wasn't quite so labored. That afternoon, Claire posted about the rescue on a local Facebook group for lost pets. She included photos of Guardian and the puppies, writing, "Found this brave soul on Old Pine Road, starving, injured, and guarding these two tiny lives. If anyone knows who he might belong to, please reach out. For now, we're calling him Guardian, because that's exactly what he is." Comments flooded in. People were heartbroken, inspired, eager to help. Donations came pouring into the clinic. Blankets, food, even offers to foster. But no one claimed Guardian. No microchip, no collar, no report. It was as if he had appeared from nowhere, a lone soldier guarding his last mission. That evening, Claire stood at the clinic door, her heart aching as she prepared to leave. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow," she told Dr. Harris. "I can't stop thinking about him." Dr. Harris smiled. "You've made quite an impression on him, you know." "I think he made one on me first." She reached into her purse, pulling out a small bouquet of daisies she had picked on the walk to her truck. She placed them gently beside Guardian's bed before leaving, whispering, "For the bravest heart I've ever known." Guardian blinked slowly. His eyes followed her until the door closed behind her and he was left in silence, but not alone, not anymore. The sky was still a dusky gray when Claire returned to the clinic the next morning. A light drizzle clung to her coat as she stepped out of her truck, a small basket of supplies in hand, fresh blankets, a stuffed animal, and a bag of high-calorie dog treats. But her heart carried something even more tender: hope. When she walked into the clinic, the familiar jingle of the bell greeted her, but this time it felt warmer, more intimate. Dr. Harris was already at the counter, flipping through a chart. The moment she saw Claire, a soft smile spread across her face. "You've got someone waiting for you," she said knowingly. Claire walked briskly to the recovery room. There he was, Guardian, sitting upright in his padded bed, head lifted, eyes alert. He looked weak but dignified, like a soldier recovering from war yet refusing to let his posture betray the battles he'd fought. Claire dropped to her knees beside him, her throat tightening. "Look at you," she whispered, reaching out to stroke his graying muzzle. "I missed you." His tail gave a gentle thump against the blanket and he leaned into her hand. It wasn't just affection, it was trust. The silent kind, built not from time, but from truth. The puppies were doing better too. A nurse brought them in, wrapped snugly in soft towels. They made tiny chirping sounds as they were placed beside Guardian. Immediately his body shifted, protective instinct awakening. One paw moved over the towel as if to shield them. Claire watched, utterly still. "You're still guarding them," she said softly. "Even now." Dr. Harris entered the room quietly and pulled up a chair. "There's something else," she said gently. "We ran some blood work, checked his dental age, and compared it with physical condition. He's around 10 years old for a stray, especially one in this condition." Claire nodded, listening intently. "But that's not all. One of our interns did some digging after your post went viral. She recognized something about Guardian. A scar above his eye, a missing toe on his back paw. He matches a dog from a case file, an abandoned property on the outskirts of town, a house condemned after an elderly woman passed away a few months ago. Claire's eyebrows knit together. She lived alone. No family, no neighbors. Her body wasn't found for days. But apparently she had one companion, a German Shepherd mix. Authorities never found the dog. They assumed it had run off. But what if he didn't? What if he stayed, guarding her, and then those puppies? Claire covered her mouth, her breath catching. You think the puppies are hers? Or hers through him? Doctor, Harris looked at Guardian with a quiet reverence. I think this dog loved someone very deeply, and when that person was gone, he held on to the only thing left, his duty. Those pups must have been born later. Maybe another stray wandered by. But Guardian, he stayed. Starved, suffered, waited. Claire looked at Guardian, whose eyes seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and patience, and still protected them. She couldn't stop the tears this time. They spilled freely, silently, as she bent forward and kissed his head. You noble, noble boy, she whispered. Over the next week, Guardian's recovery was slow but miraculous. Claire visited every day, morning and night. She brought stories, played soft music, and even read to him from an old book of poetry her grandfather used to love. It felt ridiculous at first, but Guardian listened, his eyes gently blinking like he understood every word. The puppies began opening their eyes, little balls of fuzz wobbling on unsteady legs. They recognized Guardian first, nuzzling close to him every time they were placed in the room. He sniffed each one, his body always curling protectively around them. But the more Claire watched him, the more she noticed something else. His eyes always wandered to the door, always listening, waiting, for something or someone. One day, Claire arrived earlier than usual, carrying a small tin of homemade chicken and rice. She passed by the front desk where Dr. Harris sat, looking unusually thoughtful. There's something strange, Dr. Harris said. One of the puppies, this little one here, has a congenital heart murmur, unusual but not unheard of. What's odd is, I've seen this condition before, not just once. Claire tilted her head. In other pups? Dr. Harris nodded. Yes, a litter we treated 2 years ago. From a stray named Daisy. She had the same soulful brown eyes, same coat pattern. We treated her and found homes for all her pups, but she disappeared shortly after. Claire's heart panged. You think Guardian knew her? I think he loved her. A hush fell between them, and in that silence, a puzzle completed itself. Claire slowly walked into the back, heart heavy with realization. She sat beside Guardian, her fingers lacing through his fur. You lost more than one, she said softly. You lost her too. He didn't move, but his eyes closed slowly, as if acknowledging everything without a single word. Later that day, Claire found herself back at the abandoned property Dr. Harris had mentioned. The house was dilapidated, its windows shattered, the porch collapsing under years of neglect. But in the backyard, amid overgrown grass and broken furniture, Claire found it. A shallow grave, marked by a weathered wooden board. Handwritten on it, faintly but still visible, My Daisy, you were my heart. Claire knelt beside it, tears falling freely. So that was it. The woman, the dog, the love he carried, the loss, and then those helpless pups. Guardian had become their protector, their father, and perhaps even their only link to a world that had collapsed in silence. She turned back toward the truck, the wind rustling through the trees like a whisper. I'll take it from here, she murmured. And behind her, the grave stayed quiet, but not forgotten. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through Claire's curtains, golden and soft, like the warmth of a familiar touch. It had been 3 days since she visited the gravesite behind the crumbling home, the one Guardian had never abandoned in his heart. Since then, something had changed, not just in Guardian, but in her. Every morning now, Claire's thoughts began and ended with Guardian. She woke thinking about his tired eyes, those gentle whimpers he gave when the puppy stirred, and the way his body tensed at every unfamiliar sound, always alert, always protective. He was healing. Physically, yes, but more than that. Emotionally. Something deep inside him had started to mend. Claire had taken a week off work. Not because she needed the break, but because she couldn't bear the idea of being away from them. From him. From the pups. The whole clinic had fallen in love with the little makeshift family. Even Dr. Harris had begun calling them the miracle litter. And Guardian. He was no longer just a name she gave out of necessity. He had become a symbol, a lesson in love, a testament to silent strength. Claire pulled up to the clinic just as the sun crested the horizon. She balanced a small crate filled with toys and a new blanket, one with tiny red hearts embroidered in the corners. Her boots splashed in the early morning puddles as she walked, but she didn't care. Every step toward that door was a step closer to them. Inside the recovery room, Guardian was awake. As always, his ears perked the moment she entered, and he gave a soft bark, the kind that wasn't alarm but recognition. His tail wagged, a slow, sweeping motion that seemed to say, "You came back. I'll always come back," she whispered. The puppies were bigger now, no longer the tiny, helpless bundles they had been a week ago. Their fur had grown fluffier, their legs stronger. One of them, a particularly bold little girl with one white paw, clumsily tumbled toward Claire the moment she sat down. Claire scooped her up and held her close. "You've got your dad's bravery," she murmured. At that, Guardian lifted his head higher. Dr. Harris walked in moments later, a folder in hand. "Blood work is almost clear," she said cheerfully, "and we ran some imaging. Guardian's leg should heal well enough that he'll walk normally. Maybe a limp here or there, but he's stronger than we thought." Claire beamed, but the worry didn't fully leave her face. "And what happens next?" she asked. Dr. Harris paused, reading the room, reading Claire. "That's up to you." Claire looked at Guardian, who had now rested his head between his paws, eyes trained on her. "I want to take them home," Claire said, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Harris smiled knowingly. "I was hoping you'd say that." By that afternoon, Claire's house had transformed. The old guest room became the den, complete with 2 soft dog beds, shelves of supplies, and a heater in the corner to keep the pups warm during the cool nights. Guardian's bed, larger, plush with his name stitched into it by Claire herself, was placed by the window. From there he could see the trees, the yard, the sun. Claire watched as the trio explored the room for the first time. The puppies squealed and tripped over their own feet, sniffing everything. Guardian, slower and more deliberate, paced the room before settling near the window. That night, Claire sat on the floor with them. One puppy curled on her lap, another tucked under Guardian's belly. The third nibbled on the edge of her sock, tail wagging madly. She looked over at Guardian. "I wonder if you miss her," she said quietly. Guardian didn't move, just stared out the window. "Not the woman," Claire continued. "I know you miss her, but I mean Daisy, the mother of these pups, your partner." The room felt still. Outside, the wind stirred the trees gently. "I wish you could tell me how it happened," Claire whispered. "If she was hurt, if she left, or if you just waited and waited until there was no one left but you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You didn't just guard the pups. You carried her memory in every step." She reached out and stroked his head. "You don't have to be strong anymore. Not by yourself." Over the next week, life took on a new rhythm. Morning feedings, afternoon playtime, evening walks. Guardian took every task seriously. He followed Claire room to room, and when the puppies cried, he was the first to check on them, even before she could. But more than that, Guardian had begun to smile. It started subtly, his mouth opening just a bit more, his eyes brighter, tail wagging with more confidence. He no longer flinched at loud noises, no longer stood rigid at the door. Slowly, he had begun to believe that safety wasn't just a memory. It was now. One night after a long walk around the property, Claire and Guardian sat on the porch. The puppies were inside, asleep in a pile of dreams and tiny whimpers. Claire sipped tea. Guardian sat beside her, staring at the moon. "You know," she said, "I think she would have liked me." "Daisy?" Guardian's ears twitched. "I think she would have trusted me with them. With you." She sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that carries both sorrow and peace. "Maybe this is what love is," she added. "Not just guarding graves or waiting at windows, but trusting again, letting someone else carry the weight." She turned to him. "And I'll carry it, as long as you let me." The next morning, Claire posted a photo to her small rescue blog. It was of Guardian, sitting proudly among his pups, a red blanket behind them, and sunlight pouring in from the window. The caption read, "He guarded their lives when no one else did. Now he watches them grow, safe and warm. He didn't just protect them, he saved them." The post went viral in hours. People from around the world commented, cried, and offered donations. They shared stories of their own dogs, of love and loss, of redemption. But Claire didn't need viral fame. She had everything she needed, right here. That night, just before bed, Claire knelt beside Guardian and whispered, "You're home now, and you'll never be alone again." And for the first time since they'd met, Guardian did something he hadn't done before. He licked her cheek, not because he was hungry or scared, but because he believed her, because he was loved. Weeks passed, and the once starving, grieving dog was now part of something beautiful, something whole again. Guardian had taken to Claire's home like he'd always belonged there. The puppies were thriving, scampering through the halls like little whirlwinds of energy, while Guardian watched over them with calm, ever-present eyes. But even as peace settled into the corners of their lives, Claire still wondered, what exactly had Guardian been guarding all that time? What truth had he wrapped in his loyalty, even as his world fell apart? The question weighed on her, especially when she looked at the gravesite she had found him beside. There was still something unspoken in his eyes, like his story wasn't finished yet. One crisp morning, Claire loaded the pups into the back of her SUV and called to Guardian, who came trotting eagerly with his gentle limp, tail wagging. She didn't say where they were going. Part of her wasn't sure herself. But she followed instinct, something deeper than logic. She drove past town, down winding roads until she reached the abandoned property where she'd first found him. The place looked even more desolate than before. But Guardian, the moment, she opened the car door, stepped onto the ground like he was returning to a sacred place. Claire followed him as he padded toward the back of the house, where wildflowers had started to creep through cracks in the stone. The grave marker was still there, a weather-worn piece of wood, etched faintly with the name Daisy. Claire crouched beside it, brushing leaves from its base. Her throat tightened. "Was she yours?" she whispered. Guardian didn't move, but he stood tall beside the grave, eyes soft, tail still. Claire's eyes wandered across the neglected yard. Something glimmered in the far corner, partially buried beneath a pile of old wood and leaves. She rose slowly and walked over. As she got closer, her heart skipped. It was a small rusted lockbox, not very large, about the size of a shoebox, the kind someone might hide personal treasures in. She turned to Guardian. "This what you were guarding?" His ears perked, and for the first time, Claire saw something close to urgency in his stance. She crouched down, gently lifted the box, and carried it back to the porch steps. With some effort, she pried it open. Inside were letters, over a dozen of them. Faded photographs. A leather collar with a brass tag that read, Max. Tears stung her eyes. The letters, written in looping, neat cursive, were addressed to a man named Tom, and they were from Daisy. Claire began to read aloud. "Dear Tom, I don't know if this will reach you. You've been gone so long now, overseas, fighting that war I wish never touched our lives. Every day I wait for a letter. Every day I walk with Max to the mailbox, hoping, But nothing yet. I'm scared. I'm tired. And I miss you. She flipped to the next. Max won't leave my side. He knows I'm not well. The doctors say I'm running out of time, but I can't believe them. I promised I'd wait for you. I made Max promise too. Claire's vision blurred. If something happens to me and Max is still here, please know that he did everything he could. He watched over me. He watched over the puppies. Yes, Tom, we have puppies. I didn't get a chance to tell you in my last letter. They're beautiful. They're yours. Ours. The last letter was addressed simply, to whoever finds him. His name is Max. He's more than a dog. He's a protector. He's a father. He's my heart. If you see him with the pups, please understand he stayed because he loved them, because he promised me he would. Please don't separate them. Please love him. Claire pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing. So Guardian wasn't just a dog. He was Max, Daisy's Max. The dog who had loved fiercely, protected relentlessly, and honored a promise long after his person had passed. She turned to him slowly. Max, oh Max, you kept your promise. The old dog stepped forward and gently rested his head in her lap. Claire cried harder than she had in years. That night back home, Claire framed the letter and placed it above Max's bed. The name Guardian stayed, because it was still who he was, but now he had another name too, a full history, a truth. The puppies, now named Hope, Charlie, and Luna, were already lined up for adoption, only if the right families came along. But Claire was beginning to doubt whether she could part with any of them. Still, she knew she had to tell the story. So she wrote. She posted photos, the letters, and Max's journey to her blog, and shared it across her rescues page. The post exploded. People from across the world sent messages. Veterans who had dogs overseas, families who'd had to leave pets behind in tragedy, people who had lost everything but found hope in a dog's loyalty. Max became a symbol, not just of survival, but of love without end, of devotion that goes beyond death, of the promises dogs make silently, and the ones they keep even when no one's watching. Claire began receiving letters. One came from Tom's nephew, who had been following her rescues blog and recognized the name Daisy. My uncle never came back. He died in service, but he spoke of Daisy in every letter. He always wondered if she knew how much he loved her. Please know, Max's loyalty is a legacy. I'm so grateful you told his story. Years passed. The puppies grew strong and too were adopted into loving homes nearby where Claire visited often. Hope stayed with Max and Claire, the bold pup who had first crawled into her lap. Max's fur had grown grayer. His steps were slower, but his eyes still sparkled when Claire came into view. They sat often by the porch where Claire would read to him from a book or just talk, knowing he understood every word. And on one particularly quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and the trees whispered in the wind, Max laid down beside her, rested his head on her foot, and let out one final breath. Claire held him, tears pouring silently. You kept your promise, she whispered again, and I'll keep mine. I'll tell the world about you. Max was buried beside Daisy under a tree full of blossoms. Claire placed a small stone marker above the earth. Max, the guardian. He watched over hearts and taught us how to love beyond goodbye. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like to honor Max's unwavering love. Share it with someone who believes in the loyalty of dogs. Drop a comment to let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the bond we share with dogs.